Hello, and this one's kind of going to be a follow-up video to my white universal video, where I'm kind of trying to go about kind of a racial dialogue in American politics in kind of a different way, and more of the angle of kind of the insights I've been picking up on over the years. And I think, in that white universal video that I recommended, when I was kind of laying out, this kind of these postmodern, if you will, arguments and insights about claims like empiricism and science and stuff like this, and you see this all the time in kind of the political minutia on some of these kind of more mainstream, or not really just mainstream, but just kind of like these conservative or kind of like reason driven people on the right, or personalities, if you will. And when like these kind of like leftist arguments are brought up about like, oh, science is like it's almost like this white invention, and takes like that, and the right usually kind of just laughs it off, and it's just like, well, what a stupid idea, because just like, what else is there but science? And I guess you could obviously look around in the world and see the utility of it. That's not like really the point, but the point is ultimately that these are constructs after all, and they were constructs created in these kind of white societies. But what I'm trying to get at is not to just discredit that totally and just laugh it off as kind of, because ultimately what the left is doing, right, this just out of resentment, they're just resenting white people and like science and stuff like that. They're just taking that kind of postmodern attitude and they're just using it in a resentful way, where I want to use it in more of an affirming way. But more than that, I obviously want to use that in kind of a political way, as this kind of issue of, I don't even necessarily consider it immigration is kind of the big policy idea that is kind of discussed about how to deal with it, but it's really more about like us becoming de-worlded, and I'm using that more in like kind of like this technological way, as opposed to this kind of geographic way where in the past, and I've pointed out too, where it's not even necessarily just white Wignat nationalism or something like that, but it's like you have a neighborhood, and you have like several different Latino like families in there, but they actually have these different nationalities, these different kind of kind of what I think in America is like the biggest victim of, and maybe one of the symptoms that we've kind of put on to the rest of the world, is kind of like we just see race as kind of this minutia of like melanin, of like, oh well, black man, Asian man, white man, and there's no perception at all almost of any of these kind of like cultures, and realizing any of these differences at all. And that's one of the big problems, I think, that this kind of like corporate capitalist America empire has really brought out as a symptom. Like this kind of like export of McDonald's and Starbucks and these corporations, like that's our gift to everyone. And obviously from my own preference, I think that's vapid, but I think most people actually desire something more. They just haven't really thought of it in that kind of way, or it's just such a far away reaching idea that's just not even worth discussing or even bringing up to begin with. And quite frankly, a lot of them just don't care, and a lot of people in this kind of sphere have to realize that. And why something like a democracy is, you're kind of seeing democracy more and more almost presented as this just foe to populism now, or the kind of like call to. I think it's I've kind of discussed this before, but when it comes to like populism, um, there's just this kind of white America allegiance to it. But as time goes on, there's also been like these kind of minority groups who have kind of like settled in, and obviously one of them, the one that sticks out the most, obviously, is Black America, and obviously for the historical reasons of it wasn't really their choice to come here, right? And so they've always just been a part of this kind of Western canon as well, whether they liked it or not. And when you take that in and kind of see that experience extrapolated onto this kind of left-wing, like democratic political system of this kind of resentment. But I think one of the things that's a problem with this kind of like global, people of color kind of term is that there's these kind of like older racial groups who have now like are starting to age, and when you de-world something and then you kind of replant it, eventually it's going to become a part of that ecology. And so like you can say that like these immigrant groups, I think a lot of them, as times goes on, they're kind of starting to realize that, hey, as immigration keeps ramping up, like my piece of the pie just keeps like dwindling. And the idea that Black America and like this people of color, if you will, like kind of experiences like one and the same is just a total farce to me, because that just because of the feature that I just laid out alone, like Black America has always been a part of this this kind of Western project, because when they were freed by the abolitionists and Lincoln, and then you had like the Reconstruction era, especially in the South, where there's tons of blacks who were freed. They learned to read and write through the English language. They were taught, and with that comes like, obviously, if you're going to learn learn someone's language, then it would be we could assert that if you're going to speak English, then what the English finds interesting to begin with to point out through language is in itself kind of a privileging. And so what does that kind of mean, almost in like a political expression? And really what we're trying to kind of get at is, this is why you kind of have these esoteric left-wing circles who can like quote first of all, you have to ask like why do minorities even care about something like kind of like rights and something like that to begin with. And I think most of the contemporary right, they don't even really like think about something like that. They just kind of deduce it up to, well, they're just kind of this faux, and maybe we can use like Cadence Owens or something like that to make a bunch of based minorities like come out of this or something like that, or trying to like turn the Latino demographic or something like that. And so this kind of like left-wing postmodern relative attitude it can just be discarded and laughed at, because when it comes to this kind of liberation of minorities and their expression, ultimately it means nothing, because there's only the choices of what's laid out and revealed to us through this kind of like technological experience that we're all undergoing under this global empire. And obviously what I just laid out when it comes to like language theory. So it's kind of interesting when you lay that out and see kind of like these BLM demonstrations and whatnot, this kind of like revolution and whatnot. And that's pretty exclusive actually to Black America, compared to other places around the world. Like I think a lot of like my international like friends I've talked to has pointed out this kind of like American uh, kind of description of how at any time it's just like we're just gonna revolt and have this successful revolution and just start over, kind of like how Thomas Jefferson suggested we just did that like at the start of every century or something like that. Every 100 years we just torch the whole damn thing and start it anew. And so obviously that kind of attitude is expressed from the fact that Black America has been a part of this experience, and these the native cultures as well, and obviously the Latino migrations through the 1800s, and kind of going through my own family lineage through kind of the Midwest and whatnot. There's these old minority groups who have also been here, and kind of they were at one point not really a part of this ecology, whether they were brought here or what have you. But eventually, they, like a tree, it blossoms and becomes a part of the ecology as well. And so, like, this idea that, like, people of color are all on this, like, same, like, continuum of, like, this kind of, really just, like, a fake psyop attempt of, like, the left to try to kind of create this fake coalition of the marginalized, when there's distinct features of all these different groups. But ultimately, though, I think what else that means, though, is, and why I think like this kind of relativist attitude on the left gets it wrong, is that we all have these access to the same technology at the same time, and the same kind of environment, and there's kind of obviously class and stuff like that, but so all we do is just kind of like take our tribe, like Latino rights and Black rights and these different groups kind of all assembled around the scarecrow that I've talked about when it comes to like institutional power and the white man and whatnot. But when you actually press kind of these groups, such as BLM or really any of them, even some of the more well thought out ones on kind of like the esoteric spheres of kind of like these political questions, what do they really care about? And it's mainly just some kind of socialism or communism, like, or something about capitalism. And like I've shit on capitalism on this channel enough already, but ultimately it is about these kind of like monetary affairs, these like for the left or whatever, for just where's the 1400. That's really what a lot of all of these politics on kind of this the people of color like coalition care about, is these welfare these questions on trying to get their kind of bigger cut on wealth distribution. I'm not saying that they might not deserve it or anything. That's not really the point. My point is really like nobody even thinks about something like art, or what are these differences, what makes me different from this kind of like Anglo Empire in like an actual redeeming way instead of just my color, things like that. And we can talk about other than just the fact that obviously there's just this antagonistic attitude towards the Western canon and kind of the contributions of I think Dr. Seuss is trying to, like, they're going after him right now or something like that. And I don't think it's talked about enough, because there's no real like discussion about this, because nobody even is arguing for it on kind of like, I guess, this kind of perspective of being a Maramut, really, let's be honest. But ultimately, though, you know, every time you kind of go and like erase these statues or these kind of like, these evil white man like relics of history, all it is it's just gonna create kind of more of this infantized needing, not just you can kind of see where I'm going for it, kind of more in like this wealth distribution, and you can go through someone like Thomas Sowell or something like that and see his catalog, which is like a part of every based minority's like talking points. But more than that, it's just the fact that even if we were like liberated and given these like cultural expressions, it's ultimately still going to be along the concepts of like what this Anglo Empire sees like as like answers, and usually it's through like representation. And in this like and in particular right now, when you actually look and are able to see our place in history, this is one of the things that's going to help keep these kind of like immigrant groups de-worlded, if you will, is they don't understand the Western canon, they don't actually interact it, they just see it as evil, as a scapegoat. And it's very valuable to not understand your own placement in history. So these people are victims of getting robbed of actually being able to self-actualize, in my opinion, as well. And I don't think that's ever really brought up because, there's a lack of representation of that, if you will. But, you have to understand that representation and, that's also like kind of these concepts that just show how, these academics and these activists, like, they have nothing really to show for it. They just kind of point how, science and blah, blah, blah is just this white empiricism and it's just because of this like imperial empire, and but when they're actually left alone and liberated, like we kind of saw through the popularity of like Black Panther, if you will. Like, look at Wakanda. Wakanda was this utopian society, kind of like African society, at least that's what they were trying to get at. And, it looked exactly like you would expect what, like, the Anglo fantasy of society would be. It was very technocratic and whatnot. And I think that's a good demonstration and an example where, you saw even people actually kind of on the esoteric, like, alt-right, thought it was interesting too, kind of. But I think they kind of saw it more as, like, a competition thing, because the alt-right kind of has that like masculinity about it, where they want to like actually compete and show their worth through competition. I'm not saying that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but there's just kind of that male kind of vitality to it. And I think you can actually see that too in kind of these BLM activists and whatnot. They kind of they have the same kind of understanding, where they want to, I think they also want to kind of compete, and that's why they kind of liked the movie so much, and they were so drawn to it and thought it was really interesting. But yeah, I think that ultimately it's the same kind of errors that I've been pointing out, which ultimately all these answers are just kind of like based in wealth distribution. There's no sense of actual like representation, right? What's the quality of this actual representation? And if we want to look at the quality, let's look at some of these activists. You have famously people like Shaun King. You have, let's look at some of these kind of like cultural like icons in these communities. And it's usually not exactly a family man. It's usually not someone that you would put a lot of trust in, other than maybe in kind of this agreeance of like we're both in this struggle. And there's a lot of power to that. There's actually a lot of that's one of the strongest bonds of brotherhood. But there's more to it than just struggle. You have to eventually, you can't just struggle forever and just sit in it. You have to eventually like pull yourself out of it, because you want to actually eventually, whether you think you want it or not, you want to eventually be ready to face an even bigger struggle. And I think that's one of the bigger questions that could be asked for kind of these people of color groups as we go forward. And what I would ask them is, let's say the struggle was taken away. Let's say that the scapegoat's gone, and you kind of just had it all. What does this society actually look like? Like, what is it going to stand on? Are you going to like just literally like? Is it going to be science and empiricism? Is it going to be like, what is the traits? What are the attributes of that? And that's one of the things I would ask. And what I'd ask a lot of these kind of like cultural relativists is like, what do you expect really at the end of the day? I know that kind of sounds really blunt and kind of like I'm being a dick, but if you really think about it, what are these movements more than just kind of controlled opposition and really just grifting? But yeah, I think that's just kind of the thoughts I wanted to give for this video. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate all the views I've been getting. I actually am surprised by, especially on BitChute. It really is telling how this text censorship's really been going on, where YouTube by far is the brand, right? The monopoly. And my growth on YouTube, like I have more subscribers on there, but that's because I have more friends who use that platform. On BitChute, like my most organically growing videos are on BitChute by far. And like my YouTube algorithm's like pathetic, even though I'm getting likes and not really too many comments, which I understand actually from what I've been told. You want to actually have like unique comments and likes and stuff like that, but I do appreciate all the views I've been getting, and I appreciate the shares and whatnot. I know I haven't really like actually said that in any videos since I've done like almost 15 now already, but yeah, I appreciate all the views and love you guys have been giving. It's really awesome to actually have people enjoy this content that I've kind of sat on for all this time. But yeah, thanks for watching.